They thought the forest would hide their crime, but they didn't know he was watching. Stay with me, because this story is about a woman who fell into the hands of bandits, and the stranger who changed her fate forever. My name is Clara, and that night I should never have been walking alone through the old forest road. The shadows were too heavy, the silence too sharp, and then they appeared. Rough hands grabbed me, their voices full of laughter and cruelty. I screamed, but the trees swallowed my voice. They dragged me deeper into the woods, their plans clear in every twisted word. I thought no one would ever hear me. Until I saw him. A tall man stepped out of the dark with the calm strength of someone who belonged to the forest. His eyes burned, his jaw set hard, and in his hands he carried nothing but an axe slung over his shoulder. "Let her go," he said, his voice steady, echoing like thunder among the trees. For the first time that night, the bandits looked afraid. The bandits laughed at first, thinking he was just one man, but the moment he moved, everything changed. He swung the axe with the precision of someone who had spent his life in these woods, not to kill, but to strike fear. The first blow shattered a branch near their feet, and the echo cracked through the night like lightning. One of them lunged at him with a knife, but the forester twisted his arm, sending the blade clattering to the ground. Another grabbed me, trying to drag me back, but in an instant the man was there, pulling me free with a grip that felt unbreakable. "Run," he whispered to me, but I couldn't move, not when 3 of them circled him, snarling like wolves. He planted his feet in the dirt, eyes fixed on them. "This is my forest," he growled, "and you don't leave here with her." The fight that followed was brutal, the fists, branches, the flat side of the axe. Every move he made was controlled, as if the woods themselves guided him. One by one, the bandits fell back, bruised, bloodied, and terrified. By the time the last one staggered into the dark, limping away, silence returned, heavy but safe. He turned to me then, breathing hard, sweat glistening on his brow. "You're safe now," he said softly, lowering the axe. And for the first time, I realized that the stranger who had appeared out of nowhere wasn't just a forester, he was my savior. He reached for my hand, rough and warm, and guided me away from the clearing where the echoes of violence still lingered. The forest was silent now, the only sound our footsteps crunching over leaves. My legs trembled with every step, but his presence steadied me, as if nothing in the dark could touch me while he walked beside me. The moonlight cut through the branches, glinting off his sharp features, and I kept stealing glances at him, unable to believe he was real. His shirt was torn, his knuckles bloodied, but his stride was firm, unshaken. We moved deeper along a hidden trail, and though fear still clung to me, a strange warmth began to rise, the kind that had nothing to do with safety alone. At last we reached a small cabin tucked between the trees. He opened the door, the wood creaking, and gently pulled me inside. The fire was already burning, as if the forest itself had known we were coming. He looked at me in the glow of the flames, his chest rising and falling with each heavy breath, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The heat of the fire filled the small cabin, chasing away the night's chill, yet the air between us felt hotter still. He poured water into a tin cup, pressed it into my hands, and his fingers lingered just a second too long. My pulse quickened, not from fear anymore, but from the nearness of him. He sat across from me, the flames painting shadows across his face, making him look both fierce and untouchable. His silence wasn't heavy, it was protective, commanding, as though words were unnecessary. I sipped slowly, my hands trembling, and when I set the cup down, his gaze never left me. Outside, the forest lay in perfect stillness, but inside, every heartbeat was louder than thunder. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and the firelight caught the edge of his eyes. "You're safe here," he said at last, his voice low, steady, and final. But the way he looked at me told me I was more than just safe, I was seen, claimed by the wild strength of the man who had torn me from the hands of darkness. I could hardly breathe under the weight of his gaze, the flames flickering and catching in his eyes like embers. My dress was torn, my hair tangled, but the way he looked at me made me feel untouched, whole again. He rose slowly, each step deliberate as he crossed the narrow space between us. The wooden floor creaked beneath his boots, the fire crackled louder, yet all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. He stopped just in front of me, towering, his shadow stretching over mine, and for a moment he said nothing, just reached out, his rough fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. That single touch sent a shiver down my spine, not of fear, but of something fierce and inevitable. In the quiet cabin, with the forest guarding us outside, I knew the night was far from over. What had begun as terror was shifting into something I had never expected, and could no longer resist. His hand lingered by my cheek, the roughness of his fingers contrasting with the gentleness of the gesture. I lifted my eyes to meet his, and the closeness between us crackled like the fire behind him. He smelled of pine and smoke, of earth and rain, a scent that felt as steady and raw as the man himself. My breath came shallow, trembling, while his was deep, unhurried, like he was in complete control of the moment. He leaned closer, his shadow engulfing me, and the world outside the cabin disappeared. There was no forest, no night, no memory of fear, only his presence, filling every corner of my being. His thumb traced lightly along my jaw, and I felt my body lean toward him as if drawn by a force older than words, older than choice itself. His touch grew firmer, his thumb resting beneath my chin, tilting my face upward until there was no space left to hide. The fire crackled louder, casting golden light across the lines of his face, and in that glow he looked less like a stranger and more like something the forest itself had given life to, wild, untamed, unbreakable. His lips hovered inches from mine, his breath hot and steady, and I felt my heart hammering so violently it seemed to echo through the wooden walls. I should have pulled back, I should have spoken, but every instinct in me longed only to close the gap. And then he did, pressing his mouth to mine, slow at first, deliberate, as though claiming not just my lips but every fear, every trembling moment that had brought me here. The world fell away, leaving only the fire, his strength, and the undeniable truth that I belonged to this night, and to him. His kiss deepened, strong and unyielding, yet filled with a strange tenderness that made my knees weaken. I clutched at his shirt, feeling the rough fabric beneath my fingers, the steady thrum of his heartbeat pounding just as fiercely as mine. He drew me closer, his arm firm around my waist, pulling me against the solid warmth of his chest. The firelight danced across the walls, shadows swaying with every movement, as if the whole cabin breathed with us. Every trace of fear that had haunted me in the forest melted away, replaced by the raw certainty that I was no longer a victim of the night. I was his, held in the arms of the man who had fought darkness itself to save me. His lips moved with growing urgency, and yet there was still a restraint in the way he held me, as if he knew the strength in his body could overwhelm but chose instead to cradle me like something precious. His hand slid along my back, slow, deliberate, anchoring me in the storm of emotions that raged inside. My breath broke against his mouth, shallow and desperate, while his remained steady, commanding, the rhythm of a man who had faced violence and now claimed peace in me. The fire behind us roared, heat pressing against our skin, but it was nothing compared to the blaze kindling in my chest. I felt it then, this night was not just a rescue, not just survival. It was a bond sealed in firelight and trembling hearts, unspoken yet undeniable, and I knew I would never be the same again. He drew back just enough to look at me, his forehead resting against mine, his eyes burning with a promise that words could never hold. His breath brushed my lips, steady and grounding, while my own came in ragged bursts. His hand rose to cup the side of my face, thumb stroking gently along my cheek as though he needed to reassure himself I was real. The silence in the cabin was so complete that every creak of the firewood sounded like thunder, every heartbeat like a drum. He whispered low, almost like a vow, "No one will ever hurt you again." The way he said it wasn't just protection, it was possession, fierce and unshakable. And in that moment, wrapped in his strength, in the glow of fire and the shadows of the forest outside, I knew I didn't want to resist him. I wanted to surrender, to let this night carry me wherever it chose. His words still echoed inside me as he pulled me closer, until there was no space left between us. His chest rose and fell against my cheek, his breath carrying the scent of smoke and pine, intoxicating and grounding all at once. His hand slid lower, wrapping firmly around my waist, and I felt my body respond to every movement, forgetting fear and shadows. The world beyond the cabin ceased to exist, no forest, no darkness, only the fire and his arms holding me as if I had always belonged to him. Every touch was a confession, every breath a vow, and I knew this night would never let me go. His grip tightened, steady and sure, as though anchoring me in a storm only he could control. The firelight painted his features in gold and shadow, turning him into something untamed, more force of nature than man. His lips brushed mine again, slower this time, deliberate, carrying the weight of everything unspoken between us. My hands clutched at his shoulders, feeling the hard strength beneath, the quiet power that had saved me. Each heartbeat seemed to echo in the silence, louder than the crackle of flames, louder than the wind outside. His voice came low, rough, almost a growl against my ear, "You're mine now." And I knew in that moment it wasn't a question, nor a plea, it was the truth I had already accepted deep within me. His mouth claimed mine again, deeper, hungrier, as though he needed to erase the memory of every hand that had ever tried to harm me. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, until I could feel the heat of his body pressed into mine, the steady thrum of his heartbeat crashing in time with my own. The flames behind us flared, sparks leaping, shadows dancing wildly across the walls, echoing the storm inside us. He broke the kiss only to trail his lips along my jaw, down the curve of my neck, each touch leaving a mark that felt like both a promise and a brand. My breath came ragged, trembling, yet I clung to him, knowing with a clarity that shook me, I was no longer lost, no longer a captive of fear. I belonged here, in his arms, bound by the fire, the forest, and the raw power of the man who had saved me. His arms closed around me with a force that was both fierce and protective, holding me as if he feared I might slip away into the night. His lips lingered against my skin, burning trails that made me shiver, though the cabin was already hot with firelight. I pressed myself against him, feeling the unyielding strength of his body, the steady rise and fall of his breath, and in that closeness there was no room left for doubt. He whispered my name, low and rough, like it belonged to him alone, and every sound of it sent a tremor through me. The world outside, the forest, the bandits, the darkness, was gone. All that remained was this moment, his touch, his voice, the undeniable bond that had been forged in blood and danger, now tempered into something far more consuming. He lifted me effortlessly, his hands gripping with a certainty that made me feel both fragile and unbreakable in his arms. The floorboards groaned as he carried me closer to the fire, its glow wrapping us in a cocoon of light and heat. My breath caught as he set me down, his eyes never leaving mine, their intensity like a vow etched in flame. He brushed his thumb across my lips, slow and reverent, before lowering his forehead to mine. His voice was husky, barely more than a growl, no more fear. Not tonight. Only us. And in that moment, I knew the forest hadn't just given me back my freedom, it had given me to him. His words sank into me deeper than the fire's warmth, sealing something I couldn't name but felt in every heartbeat. His hand lingered at my waist, rough fingers tracing the curve as if memorizing me, while his other hand cupped the back of my neck, steady and unyielding. The shadows on the walls seemed to sway with us, the cabin breathing in rhythm with our closeness. His lips found mine again, slower now, each kiss deliberate, carrying weight like a promise he intended to keep forever. I melted into him, the fear that had haunted me dissolving until all that remained was heat, safety, and the undeniable truth that I belonged to the man who had fought the darkness and won me from it. His kisses deepened, no longer hurried, but heavy with certainty, as though he wanted to etch his claim into my very soul. The roughness of his beard grazed my skin, the taste of smoke and wild pine clung to his lips, and I breathed him in like air I had been starving for. His hand slid along my back, pressing me closer, anchoring me in a world that had shrunk to firelight and his heartbeat thundering against mine. Every movement was both fierce and tender, a warrior's touch laced with reverence, as if I were the only fragile thing in a life built from survival. I clung to him, trembling, realizing that what began as rescue had become something greater, something I could no longer imagine my life without. The fire roared higher, crackling like it bore witness to the storm between us, shadows leaping across the wooden walls as his mouth moved against mine with an urgency that stole every breath. His grip tightened at my waist, pulling me flush against him, and I felt his strength surround me, not as a cage but as the only place I could ever feel safe. My hands roamed across his chest, the solid heat of him grounding me even as my body trembled. He broke the kiss only to rest his forehead against mine, his voice rough, ragged, but certain, "You're mine now, nothing will ever take you from me." And in that vow, whispered in the glow of fire and shadow, I surrendered completely, knowing the forest hadn't just given me a savior, it had given me the man I was destined to belong to. His lips trailed lower, along my cheek, down the curve of my neck, each kiss slow, searing, like he wanted to leave a mark of forever on my skin. My breath hitched, a soft sound swallowed by the roar of the fire, and my fingers dug into his shoulders as if holding on to the only solid thing in a world that had spun out of control. He murmured against my throat, his voice gravelly, soaked with heat and promise, "No one else will ever touch you. Only me." The way he said it sent shivers through me, not of fear but of surrender, a surrender I no longer resisted. The cabin, the night, the danger I had escaped, everything had faded until there was only this man, this strength, this fire that bound us together tighter than chains ever could. His hands framed my face now, rough palms surprisingly gentle as he lifted my gaze back to his. The firelight caught in his eyes, fierce and unrelenting, and for a heartbeat I felt caught between terror and devotion, but then his mouth claimed mine again, and all doubt melted away. His kiss was slower, deeper, like he was carving his vow into me with every breath we shared. My body pressed against his, every line of him solid, immovable, as though the forest itself had shaped him to shield and possess me. When he pulled back, his lips brushed my ear, his words low, steady, undeniable, "From this night on, you belong to me." His words sank into me like fire through my veins, and I felt my knees weaken beneath their weight. He didn't let me fall, his arm tightened around my waist, lifting me against the solid wall of his chest, his strength wrapping around me like iron and heat. His lips captured mine again, slower now, almost reverent, and in that kiss was a promise more powerful than chains or vows. My fingers curled into his shirt, clinging to him as though the world outside could try to tear me away. But I knew nothing ever would. The storm of fear that had begun this night was gone, burned away by the man who had stepped from the forest shadows to claim me as his own. His breath was heavy against my lips as he pressed me back toward the wooden wall, the rough boards at my back and the heat of him before me making it impossible to think of anything but him. His hand spread across my lower back, steady, unyielding, holding me in place as though I was the only thing he would never release. The firelight flickered over his face, highlighting the wild lines of his jaw, the fierce promise in his eyes, and I realized he wasn't just a man anymore, he was the answer to my fear, the end of my loneliness, the savior turned conqueror of my heart. When he spoke, his voice was low, ragged, each word striking like a vow carved in stone. The forest gave you to me, and I will never let you go. His words wrapped around me tighter than his arms, sealing me to him in a way that felt final, unbreakable. His mouth found mine again, slower this time, deliberate, each kiss sinking deeper until it felt like he was branding my very soul. My hands slid up his chest to his neck, clinging to him as if the world beyond these walls could vanish and I would never notice. The fire popped, throwing sparks into the air, shadows leaping around us like spirits of the woods bearing witness. His hand rose to cradle the back of my head, guiding me closer, his forehead resting against mine between kisses as he whispered, rough and certain, "You're mine, always." And in that moment, with the fire blazing and the night sealed away outside, I knew I would never belong anywhere else but here, in his arms, in his claim, forever. His arms closed around me fully, drawing me into the breadth of his chest until I felt swallowed by his strength, protected and possessed all at once. His lips brushed along my temple, down to my ear, his breath hot and uneven as he whispered words that seemed to bind me tighter than any chain. Nothing will take you from me. Not the dark, not the world, not even time itself. His hand roamed down my spine, every touch slow and deliberate, leaving fire in its wake, until I trembled against him with the weight of surrender. The forest outside seemed to fall silent, as if even the trees bent to witness what was sealed in that cabin, not just a rescue, not just a fleeting night, but a bond carved into my very soul, eternal and absolute. He kissed me again, deeper, fiercer, until the air between us was gone and all I could taste was the wildness of him, smoke and pine and fire. His hand tightened at my waist, pulling me flush against the hardness of his body, his strength wrapping around me like armor. I clung to him, fingers gripping his shirt as if I'd drown without his touch, and in truth, I already knew I could not survive without it. The flames behind us flared high, shadows writhing across the cabin walls, echoing the storm inside my chest. He broke the kiss only long enough to rest his forehead against mine, his voice raw, unshakable. From this night forward, you are mine, and nothing will ever change that. His vow thundered through me louder than the fire, louder than the echo of my own heartbeat. His eyes locked with mine, blazing, unrelenting, and I felt every wall inside me crumble. His hand slid up, cupping my face with a tenderness that clashed with the raw strength in his embrace, as if I were both sacred and claimed. His thumb brushed my lips before he kissed me again, slower now, heavy with meaning, each breath we shared binding me tighter to him. The cabin seemed to dissolve, the world beyond forgotten, until there was only his warmth, his voice, his presence enveloping me. In that moment, I knew the forest had not simply spared me, it had delivered me, body and soul, into the arms of the man I was never meant to escape. His mouth moved against mine with a rhythm that felt endless, like the fire itself had taken form in his kiss. His fingers threaded into my hair, firm yet gentle, tilting my head as though he wanted to claim every breath, every sound, every part of me. I melted into him, pressed so close that even the smallest gap disappeared. My body molded against his strength. His heartbeat thundered through me, steady and fierce, and I knew it would echo inside me forever. He broke away only to trail his lips down my neck, lingering at the hollow of my throat, each touch searing a vow into my skin. The forest outside was silent, reverent, as if the world itself knew this night was no accident, no chance rescue. It was destiny, and it had bound me eternally to the forester who saved me. His lips lingered at my throat, each kiss slower, deeper, as though he carved his claim into me with every breath. His hands moved along my body with a rough tenderness, guiding me closer, holding me so tightly I felt as though he feared the world might steal me away. My fingers dug into his shoulders, clinging to him, the warmth of his skin beneath the torn fabric sending shivers through me. The fire roared higher, casting wild shadows that danced across the cabin walls, and in that light he looked less like a man and more like a force of the forest itself, untamed, unstoppable, mine. His voice broke the silence, low and raw against my skin, "You'll never walk alone again. Wherever you are, I'll be there." And I knew those words weren't just a promise, they were a fate I could no longer escape, nor did I want to. His grip tightened as if sealing that vow into my very bones, his breath hot against my ear while the fire behind us cracked and spat, echoing the wildness between us. His hands framed my face again, forcing my eyes to meet his, and in that gaze I saw not just a savior, but a man who had chosen me as fiercely as he chose to fight the bandits. His lips found mine once more, slower now, reverent, every movement heavy with a certainty that stole my breath. My body trembled under the weight of it, not from fear, but from the overwhelming truth settling deep inside. I was no longer free, not from him, not from this bond forged in blood and fire. And as his arms locked around me, unyielding and protective, I surrendered fully, knowing I had not just been saved. I had been claimed. His arms wrapped around me as though I was the only thing left in the world worth holding on to, his strength both a shield and a cage, and I found myself leaning deeper into that embrace, craving the safety and the danger it carried. His lips pressed once more to mine, slower, gentler now, as if he wanted to soothe the storm he had set loose inside me. The fire hissed, casting golden light over his face, and I memorized every line, every shadow, knowing this moment would burn itself into me forever. His voice came rough and steady against my ear, "You're mine, Clara, not just tonight, but always." And as I clung to him, trembling yet unafraid, I understood that my life had been rewritten in that cabin. The forest had not only given me freedom, it had given me to him, bound by fire, blood, and desire that would never be undone. His words echoed through me, louder than the crackling of the flames, sinking into every corner of my soul. He kissed me again, long and unhurried, as if sealing the vow he had just spoken, and I felt the weight of it settle deep inside, unshakable. His hand slid down my spine, anchoring me, pulling me into him until there was no part of me left untouched by his warmth. My breath came ragged, my body trembling, yet in his arms I felt unbreakable, as though nothing in this world could reach me now. The cabin, the fire, the night beyond the walls, they were no longer separate things, only a backdrop to this moment where fear had died and something fierce, undeniable, and eternal had taken its place. His mouth traced a slow line along my cheek back to my lips, each kiss a brand, each breath a claim, until I could no longer remember who I had been before this night. His grip on me was steady, almost possessive, but within it I felt a strange gentleness, as though his strength existed only to hold me, never to harm me. My fingers curled into his shirt, clutching him tighter, desperate to keep the fire between us burning. The crackle of the flames, the shadows dancing on the wooden walls, all of it felt like part of the vow he had spoken, an eternal witness to the bond forged here. His voice broke the silence again. Low and rough against my ear, "You're not leaving this forest without me. You never will." And as my heart hammered against his chest, I knew he wasn't just speaking of tonight, he was speaking of forever. His words sent a shiver racing through me, a truth I could feel in the way his arms held me, in the heat of his breath against my skin. He pressed me tighter to his chest, and I let myself sink into him completely, my body molding to his as if it had always belonged there. His lips found mine once more, deeper now, hungrier, each kiss carrying the weight of possession and the promise of forever. my hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer still, the world beyond the cabin dissolving into nothing but firelight and the thunder of our hearts. The night that had begun in terror was reborn in flames of desire, and I knew with a clarity that shook me, I was no longer just alive. I was his. The fire roared behind us, casting wild shadows that danced like spirits across the cabin walls, but his shadow was the only one that mattered, engulfing mine as completely as his body consumed me. His mouth moved against mine with a fierce certainty, each kiss a command, each touch a vow, until the trembling inside me turned to fire. His hand cradled the back of my head, his other arm wrapped tight around my waist, pulling me into him as if he meant to fuse us into one. I clung to him with equal desperation, my nails biting into his shirt, needing him as much as the air I breathed. There was no past anymore, no bandits, no fear, only the storm he had ignited inside me and the truth I could no longer resist. Whatever came after this night, I belonged to him, body and soul. His lips slowed, but the intensity in his embrace only grew, his breath hot against my skin as he trailed his mouth from my lips to my neck, each touch sinking deeper than words ever could. His hand pressed firmly at the small of my back, holding me against him as though he feared the night itself might try to steal me away. I felt the roughness of his fingers, the heat of his body, and in that closeness I was no longer just a woman saved, I was a woman claimed. My chest rose and fell in frantic rhythm, but his steadiness wrapped around me like the forest itself, vast and eternal. He whispered against my ear, low and unyielding, "From this night, you are bound to me." And in the fire-lit silence, trembling yet certain, I let myself surrender fully to the man who had torn me from darkness and made me his. His words coiled around me like chains made of fire, and instead of fear I felt only the fierce pull of inevitability. His hand slid up my spine, rough palm warm through the fabric, until his fingers curved around the back of my neck, guiding me into another kiss that left me breathless. The flames crackled louder, shadows leaping wildly across the walls as though the whole forest bore witness to this moment. I clung to him, my body pressed so tightly against his that there was no space left to doubt, no way to imagine a world without his strength surrounding me. Every heartbeat, every breath became his, and as his lips branded me again and again, I understood with terrifying clarity, he had not just saved me, he had rewritten me. His words coiled around me like chains made of fire, and instead of fear I felt only the fierce pull of inevitability. His hand slid up my spine, rough palm warm through the fabric, until his fingers curved around the back of my neck, guiding me into another kiss that left me breathless. The flames crackled louder, shadows leaping wildly across the walls as though the whole forest bore witness to this moment. I clung to him, my body pressed so tightly against his that there was no space left to doubt, no way to imagine a world without his strength surrounding me. Every heartbeat, every breath became his, and as his lips branded me again and again, I understood with terrifying clarity, he had not just saved me, he had rewritten me. His kiss deepened until time itself seemed to vanish, until there was nothing but the heat of him, the roughness of his hands, and the steady force of his body holding me as though the night could not end without it. His breath broke against my lips. Ragged now, and when he pulled back just enough to look at me, the firelight caught in his eyes like molten gold. "You belong here," he murmured, voice low, heavy with finality, "with me." His thumb stroked my cheek, almost tender, though his grip at my waist was unrelenting, as if the forest itself had willed him never to let go. And in that silence, broken only by the crackle of flames and the thunder of our hearts, I realized I no longer wanted him to. His hand slid down my side, fingers tracing the curve of my waist with a slow certainty that left me trembling, every touch a reminder that I was no longer just a woman in danger, but a woman who had been chosen, claimed. He pulled me tighter against him, the hard lines of his body pressing into mine until I felt swallowed by his strength. His lips brushed across my forehead, then down to my mouth again, each kiss deliberate, sealing the vow he had spoken. The fire raged higher, casting sparks into the air, but it was nothing compared to the blaze that consumed us in that cabin. His voice came rough and final, breathed against my ear, "There is no going back. From this night on, you are mine." And as I clung to him, trembling but unafraid, I knew his words were not a promise, they were my fate. His words sank into me like iron, unshakable, undeniable. His mouth claimed mine once more, but slower now, each kiss deep and lingering, as though he wanted to etch himself into my very soul. His hand tangled in my hair, holding me firmly, while the other pressed into the small of my back, keeping me bound against him so tightly that I could feel the pounding of his heart through his chest. The fire hissed and cracked, throwing waves of heat across our skin, but it was nothing compared to the inferno burning inside me. My breath broke against his lips, trembling, and I knew there was no escape, not from him, not from the bond forged in this night. I wasn't just his in words. I was his in every heartbeat, every breath, every part of me that now existed only for him. His lips hovered at mine, his breath hot, his eyes burning with the fire that surrounded us, and in that silence I understood, this was no fleeting night, no fragile rescue. His hand tightened at my waist, grounding me, claiming me, and his voice came low, final, like a vow carved into stone. "You are mine, now and always." The forest outside stood silent, the flames roared high, and I let myself sink into his embrace with no resistance left. In that moment I knew the truth, the night that began with fear ended with surrender, and I belonged to him completely, forever bound to the man who had saved me.